Alrighty, here's A18. I had the pleasure of connecting and messaged Mr. David Hauser on LinkedIn. So here's our connection, and here's my message to set the interview. And I was able to have a FaceTime interview with him the other day, and that went really well. And so the topics that we discussed were how he was in China during the outbreak, working remotely, effect on the supply chain during and currently COVID, the company HighJump, of course, and the challenges and opportunities of living and doing business internationally before and after COVID-19. Well, not after, but like right now. So we first talked about, HighJump and how the logistics company and what exactly they do and the supply chain they do and how they're a global company, one of the biggest in the world, and they're connecting many different companies together through their logistics and, of course, supply chain. And he was telling me how him and his wife were actually in China during when all this went down, and how they were essentially, business was normal. Then all of a sudden, everything was closing down, and this was kind of an outbreak. And then they had to quarantine there for a couple of days, and then go to Singapore to quarantine. And then they had to get back to the United States because the HR representative of this company let him know, like, hey, you need to get out of here before you can, while you can. And so now he's talking about how he's in Boone, just outside of Boone right now, working remotely, and just the effects that this has had on the supply chain while they're doing that in HighJump. So basically, it's been a big challenge. And he says that he's always been working remotely. So this is nothing new to him, but just obviously you need to have people physically there, warehouses and stuff like that. And so he just said this has been a big challenge for them, globally, of course, as well, having to do things remotely. But he also talked about the fact that the challenges of that, and also the opportunities of working remotely, because he was talking about how, of course, like I said, he's been working remotely for so long, and now, like, we have to get within the whole working online and everything we can do online, and how some companies are ahead in the game with that, and some are really like slow to that were slow to that, or now having to catch up and work online and do more of their business online. And so obviously COVID-19 has had a huge effect on the company, but he's in a role now that he was talking about where he's not having to physically be traveling as much. And so this is kind of this was a change of pace for him. And so the key takeaways he was telling me was be able to adapt the global mindset. He said him and his wife have a great global mindset, and they travel all over the world, like with his business and everything like that, preparing for the online future. And just kind of talked about how supply chain is much more broad than you think. It's not just warehouses, it's logistics. It's more than just point A to point B. There's so much that goes into it. Working remotely can be challenging. And he kind of just talked about how HighJump is just looking for a younger mindset of employees now. They're really sought after just because everything that's online already, and now this whole push for online work, the younger generation is really coming in to be able to pick it up quickly. And so that's one thing he was talking about, was just HighJump is looking for younger employees as well, of course. And he was just talking again. We just kind of talked about the challenges they've had in the supply chain and the disruption that this has had on them. And then outside of that, just the opportunities that, the younger generation, like I just said. And then on top of that, just his change of pace for the work, where he is so used to traveling the world, and now he's just kind of in Boone, working remotely. But nothing new to him, but at the same time, just not able to travel as eager to get back out there. So we had a great talk, and it was about a 30-minute conversation, and got to learn a lot about HighJump and just a big, uh, differences now between from COVID and just everything that's happening in the world, and just to be able to think and be able to adapt to everything that happens. And that is the big takeaway from our meeting that we get to have with Mr. Hauser.